I hope you don't get the sickness.
My boy Kurt is a stay-at-home dad, watching Disney movies he never had. His daughter digs through all the VHS, crushing the classics in a princess dress. Informed like Scuttle, Kurt's got your ticket, making it real like Jiminy Cricket. Most off the Captain Hook, but if the Tweedle dumb, he'll be taking more shots than Bambi's mom. Leaves him raised like Simba, or cracked like the beast dishes. He'll show you a whole new world, you won't need 3 wishes. Stay-at-home Disney dad.
Greyfriars Bobby from the Disney Animated Adventure Series Volume 4. This was at the very bottom of the VH sub. We start with ads. If you're interested in Greyfriars Bobby, you might also be interested in Dumbo, Snow White, Robin Hood. Okay, Pocahontas 2 ad, Kiki's Delivery Service, Jungle Book, Mowgli's story. The monkey puts his hands on his head. Mowgli puts his hands on his head. Monkey shakes his head. Mowgli shakes his head. Monkey does a backflip. We go to a wide shot of the jungle. Feature presentation. Opening shot, this is a story about a dog that lived a century ago. He made the lives of children better for knowing him. This is his story. Walt Disney presents the true story of a dog. True story? Curtis skeptically leans forward. Credits over a Scottish countryside. Are these the Scottish Isles I hear so much about and have no idea what they actually are? We get a guy with a walking stick and a beret and his happy dog, but the credits continue. This guy is a sheep herder, I think. Caldbree Farm, 1867. Okay, what do we have here? A little girl is scared for the barking dog. The shepherd calls for the dog and it comes. The little girl seems concerned. I don't want to be that guy, but between the poor VHS audio tracks and the thick Scottish accents, most of this dialogue, going straight over my head. I can't understand the majority of this. Sorry. The little girl takes the dog inside the old farm. Dad and shepherd hop in the horse-drawn buggy and ride off. Inside, the mother is tending to the fire. Girl asks where the men went. And Mom is uncomfortable. Now I'm uncomfortable. The dog jumps out the house window and makes a break for it under the fence. The girl rushes outside and yells at some red-headed boy for help to get her dog back. This kid heroically takes one step forward, leaps over the fence, coming to a complete stop on the other side of the fence and goes, "Bobby, come back!" Not sure why he had to hop the fence to yell that. Like, he could have just as easily yelled that 3 feet back on the other side of the fence where he started. Okay, I guess the shepherd is getting too old, so the dad is taking him to town because he's been fired. Dad tries to give the shepherd 2 weeks' pay as a thank you, and he'll have none of that because of pride. Good luck and goodbye. The dad turns around to see children run by the old shepherd and almost knock him over in the middle of the street, and the dad's like, "That's show business," and keeps on going and heads home. Then the dog arrives. He found the shepherd. Reunion. Was that the movie? No, there's more. The dog runs into a restaurant. Okay, maybe he hasn't found the shepherd yet. The shepherd's name is Jacques. There's 2 adults watching children fight in the middle of the street, like it's a sport. A cat hisses at Bobby. Okay, now the dog has reunited with Jacques, who is sleeping in the street. It's raining. Some drunks spin in a circle around Jacques. The tiny dog barks and scares off the drunks. Okay, Bobby the dog fetches the guy who runs the restaurant and leads him to soaked Jacques. He takes Jacques inside. There's 10 minutes of dialogue. Jacques says to the restaurant owner, "That's a lot of books. You must be a serious man." The manager's reply, Riveting. The restaurant owner is named Mr. Trail, and he wants to take Jacques to the infirmary. Jacques says no deal, sneaks out and collapses in the street. He ends up at a house that will take him, but not the dog, so he hides the dog in his sack. He goes inside and asks the lady for a bed for the night. I think it's actually like a scummy hotel, but she stands up, and they start like absolutely beaking at each other, and this back and forth thing is shot like an old WWF interview. It's so bizarre. "I've been here before." "So you have." They got beef. He gets a room upstairs and lets the cat out of the bag. See what I did there? It almost worked. He lets the dog out of the bag. Who let the dogs out? Jacques. Sorry, nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens. The dog barks, the mean landlord comes and goes, is that you barking? And the man's like, yes, it's me barking. And she's like, okay. He tells the dog he has a Bible he can't read, and he goes to sleep. It's morning, and the restaurant owner, Mr. Trail, is asking the cops about the shepherd. The cop says, I have better things to do. And he says, so do I, and I pay the taxes that pay your wage, so go do something. It's checkout time, and the nun-looking landlady's banging on the door. The dog is licking Jacques' hand, but he's still sleeping. The dog hides under the bed as she comes in. The old man is dead. Jacques is dead. The shepherd is dead, and just like that, we got ourselves a movie. He died of pneumonia. The police clean the room and find the dog. A policeman that is really squirmy around dead bodies says, I gotta take the dog back to the station. And he grabs the dog and bails. Thumbs up for that piece of writing. That was a good conjoiner. We get sinister music and we see a man in a top hat. I'm assuming that's going to be the antagonist. The police do the funeral procession and carry the casket through the town, and the dog runs at their side. These old live Disney movies always start out so bland, and then suddenly the light switch goes on and I'm into it. Also, look at Disney killing main characters early, long before HBO would make that famous. Jacques buried and the dog lays on his grave. The man in the top hat scolds the dog and carries him out of the graveyard. The dog barks at him, then sneaks back in the graveyard and lies back down on Jacques' grave. In the morning, a couple of kids spot the dog, and apparently there's a reward for it or something, so they chase it around. It runs back to the restaurant. There's a massive boom that happens in the city once in a while. It sounds like a cannon goes off, and that's to make time. They call that the time gun. Is that a thing, a time gun? How is that not a science fiction movie franchise that's like 9 sequels deep already? We present Time Gun. The dog leads the owner to Jacques' grave. I think Top Hat antagonist owns the graveyard. He and Mr. Trail exchange words. Angry Top Hat's name is James Brown. Mr. Trail, the restaurant owner, has clever quips and old-timey burns James Brown. Why James Brown? I wish they would have remade this in the 80s and used new James Brown. Okay. The kids stick their heads out from the window again, so their house is more... And then more importantly, their bedrooms back the graveyard. This might be an orphanage. Okay, everybody figures out that Jacques' dead in the grave. Top has a moment of humanity, and then the dog appears. Brown kicks him out of the graveyard, so he follows the restaurant owner home. Trail gives some kid 6 pence to get the dog back inside the graveyard. The kid takes the money, and then is threatened with physical violence if he tells anyone. The kid gets the dog back to the graveyard, and it rests on the shallow grave, as inside, James Brown is patting himself on the back because there's no dogs in his graveyard. The next day, the dad comes to town looking for the dog. Restaurant owner tells him Jacques' dead. And he doesn't know where the dog is. The dad's like, I didn't know he was sick. I wouldn't have let him go. Trail looks at him and says, well, he's dead. Maybe there's others to blame. Yeah, give him hell, Trail. The dog sleeps in the store during the day and sleeps in the graveyard at night. The dad tries taking the dog home and it's barking like crazy. And he does it though. He returns to the farm with Bobby the dog. He tells his daughter to make the dog a bed out of straw, and she instead buries the dog in straw. Solid effort, sweetheart. As everyone leaves the room, the dog bails again. Mom asks the dad if he found the dog with old Jacques. No, old Jacques is dead. The dog digs out of the barn and it's gone. The snitch horse whinnies, but it's too late. The dog has a date with the graveyard. Dog runs through the field and streets. Time-lapse montage of the journey. There's a voice. Keeps on calling me down the road. It's where I'll always be. Greatest theme song ever. Canadian TV royalty. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Anyway, Bobby makes it back to the graveyard. I didn't mention it before because I didn't think it was an important part of the movie. But Bobby's constantly scaring off any other animals in the graveyard. Rats, cats. Let's hope he can handle maggots soon. Graveyard, James Brown and his wife go outside and James verbally tears into the dog. Quote, look at him. All mud and tangled hair. Like an old fishwife and just as useless. Wife ignores that targeted gender hate and is like, no, look at all the rats he killed. He's great. He says, there's only one thing to do. She agrees, but swerve, the only one thing to do is give him a good bath. They wash and feed the dog, then Brown carries the dog over to the graveyard sign and reads it to him. See? No dogs allowed. Suddenly there's a school field trip to the graveyard. So James Brown has to open the door for an all-girls field trip to the graveyard and the dog runs back in. The gals do a single lap of the graveyard and leave. As he's closing the door, Tiny Tim comes up. Some kid in crutches is like, why is the gate closed? Well, I think the kids that live in that adjacent house or orphanage, the rest run in and grab the dog. I think that was a distraction. They bring the dog to the restaurant owner. He's all excited. The dog is clean. The kids sass him for some reason. He says he's going to have a picnic with the dog. I'm not sure what's happening. He invites the kids into the kitchen and there's a huge spread on the table. and he feeds them all. I think these are definitely orphans. They're all dirty, and they've never had chicken. That's the 1-2 punch when you're an orphan. He tells one kid to say grace, the kid prays and mumbles, and another kid says, I didn't hear you, and he snaps back, well, I wasn't talking to you. That's some good prayer humor stuff right there. He wants to take the kid on crutches to the infirmary. Seriously, that's his answer for everything. Mr. Trail must get some sort of financial kickback for bringing people to the infirmary. The restaurant owner follows the dog back to the graveyard, and caretaker James Brown is like, it's still illegal to sleep in the graveyard, so he's gonna sleep inside with us. Weird energy, because they both want the dog now. This is a good twist. Once again, these old-timey live movies really start to pay off about halfway through. The dog weighs its options and chooses to lay on the grave again. Now the police are on the offense and give the restaurant owner, Mr. Trail, a bill for harboring an unlicensed dog. He says, Graveyard James Brown put you up to this, didn't he? He's not going to pay. He's going to take it to court. Gotta say, the VHS clamshell claims this movie is overflowing with warmth and kindness. I would disagree. It goes to court. The restaurant owner is charged for owning an unlicensed dog. This is serious. Like, he pleads not guilty. The mean cop he told off testifies against him, and the owner sasses the cop again, and everyone laughs. Mr. Trail is just dripping with charisma and winning over the jury with his clever quips, which is actually how I fantasize my inevitable court date will go for whatever it is I eventually do in my head. Like, I rally the troops, causing a slow clap from the jury that eventually turns into a standing ovation. Then each member of the jury, one by one, yells, if you're giving Curtis a ticket, you gotta give me a ticket, and give me a ticket, you gotta give all of us a ticket. I mean, they don't have to put me on their shoulders, but I'm not saying they can't. Mr. Trail is found guilty and has to return with the dog to appear again later in dog court. Not a thing. It's only 7 shillings for the license, but he refuses to pay it. The orphans start begging the public for change to raise the money themselves. I don't know why Mr. Trail is fighting this so hard. He says it's not about the money. The grave owner, James Brown, wants to be the owner of the dog, and I'm really not sure what's going on here or who the antagonist anymore is. The restaurant owner, Mr. Trail, doesn't want the dog. He could easily lay the 7 shillings or easily pay the 7 shillings and become the owner and be done with this, but he doesn't want Crypt Keeper James Brown to own the dog either. The graveyard guy seems like he actually cares about the dog now, and restaurant guy is trying to ruin it for him. The judge asks if the dog sleeps in his house. James Brown says, nah, he sleeps in the graveyard. This poor judge, this is not what he envisioned during all those long, hard years of law school, right? There it is. The judge has enough, and he says, this feels more like about winning an argument than it is about the dog between the two of you. And now the orphans show up. I just realized this is the first Disney movie that doesn't make me terrified of orphanages. These kids don't look like they're being abused or kidnapped or, lowered to their deaths into the earth. Okay, the kids come in with enough pennies to make 7 shillings. They want to buy the dog. The judge gives the dog the keys to the city. Nobody owns him, and he's free to go wherever he wants. Okay. As well as having keys to the city, the kids collectively own the dog, and it gets to live in the graveyard beside the orphanage. Everyone wins, except the restaurant owner, who is kind of an unpleasable jerk in the end anyways. Flash forward, the dog marches in a parade, and he's a local legend. It ends with Crypt Keeper James Brown letting the dog into the graveyard, then inviting restaurant owner Mr. Trail into his house to get drunk with him, because they pals now. Okay, let's see what Google says about this true story. Greyfriars Bobby was a Skye Terrier who became known in the 19th century Edinburgh for spending 14 years guarding the grave of his owner until he also died. The dog has a statue, which shows you how unfair life is, because, I've slept on a graveyard for 18 years now, and I don't have a statue.
That's what I think about.
What do you think?
What we have is a concern about Curtis Anderson. His interviewing style is not the best. His personal appearance is not the best. I was wondering if the man has some kind of a hold over the channel that he's allowed to be employed for so long with the standards of journalism and personal appearance that he has. Thank you.